And first time I met Marc Angelucci face-to-face was at the 25th anniversary face-to-face meeting of the National Coalition for Men, which the Greater New York chapter hosted here in New York. And we had been corresponding for some time before that, and he was very active on the NCFM discussion group. He proved to be a live wire. When Marc came into the room, the whole room seemed to light up. This was a man who, in my opinion, embodied the idea of being vitally alive. And that get-together was over the course of a long weekend. And in addition to there being social events, there were meetings. I got together with Marc socially a few times outside of NCFM business. He always was so attentive, so full of life. There were some other NCF meetings at which I had the pleasure of his company as well. So I'm going to stop for now. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Peter. I'm going to ask Deborah Watkins. Deborah was a treasurer of the National Coalition for Men for over 20 years and knows Marc intimately and has been a good friend of his for a long, long time. Deb?
Well, I certainly say ditto to what Peter said. And just, I'm sorry, can you come back to me?
Yes.
I can't talk.
We're all having a problem. Deb? Those of us close to Marc have not processed this yet. However, let's see what I can do here. I'm going to go to Paul, and just by way of introduction, I recall when Paul kind of started figuring this shit out, and he would join some of our discussions online, and over the years became good friends with us. And at the recent conference in Chicago one evening, we were all out back enjoying ourselves and having a beer, and Paul was trying to explain to Marc why he should not trust somebody who was at the conference alleging to be a men's rights advocate, and I was in full agreement. I don't want him to share that story, but that's how close Paul became to us. Paul?
I guess everybody can get an idea of how hard this is hit just by listening to people right now. I know it's killing me. I knew Marc's work before I met him. I didn't have the pleasure of meeting him until 2014 when he attended our first conference on men's issues. And you know, I think Peter just said that he lit up a room when he walked in, and that's exactly what he did. One evening after the speakers, we went to a karaoke bar, and Marc got right out on the stage and was singing AC/DC and doing amazingly well at it. And there were just smiles all around him. The table full of people I was sitting with were just watching him transfixed. And the thing is, that was Marc. That was the Marc I came to know later. He lit people up, and he pursued justice with absolute dedication and passion. That's all I got for now.
Thank you, Paul.
Thanks, Harry.
Somebody tell me how long we have for this event. Does it go 30 minutes, an hour? I don't know. Can somebody tell me?
We got all the time we need.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that. Boy, I had thought Paul reminded me of a story I wanted to share. Oh, here's a story. Pretty good one. Sheila Keel, who's now a member of the Los Angeles County Board of Supervisors, used to be a state representative with national aspirations. she's a bitch. She's a man-hater, a real man-hater. And when Mark and I and others, we would go up to Sacramento, sometimes we do lobbying, but Sheila Keel was being given an award on the university campus for something. And so we used to do rallies with picket signs and, the whole thing. And so we were all at this event, and Mark grabbed a sign and ran through the event. I mean, this place is packed, a couple hundred people, right? He ran through the event with this sign and blasting Sheila Keel, ran out the other side and took off. Came back to us and the police showed up. That was Marc Angelucci. He was incredible. We have a new member in our organization, that's Lori. And she came to us with good cause. And so I'd like her to share a few thoughts with us too. Lori, are you still with us?
I'm definitely here. I know a lot of you have known him much longer than I have. The pain I feel has got to be multiplied by millions for you guys, and my heart goes out to each and every one of you. Marc, sweetest man, oh my gosh. And I'm not going to get into my story. I have a son that's sitting in jail right now waiting for sentencing, has been there for 7 months on a false accusation of sexual assault. Tim Goltich, president of NCFM Chicago, is the one that introduced me to Marc. Up until that time, December, when he was sent or convicted, I was crushed, right? But talking to Marc during that conversation, he was so encouraging, so patient, encouraged me, you got to change the laws, you got to do something, keep your voice loud and clear for our men. I'm sorry. Just having him like all of my Facebook posts, encouraging, the email that we would send back and forth, and you rock, Marc. I know it's old school, but you rock. And it goes, hey, that's not old school. I say it all the time.
Thank
so
you.
one last time, Marc, you rock. Thank
That's
you.
right. Marc, you rock. That's true. Thank you, Lori. Marc has struck a chord with people, heartfelt chord with people around the world. One of the people most dear to Marc was Cassie. Cassie, are you with us? Is Cassie with us?
Yes, I'm here.
Hi, Cassie.
Hi, Harry.
So we'd like to hear from you a little bit about how you just took Marc into your family.
Oh gosh. I met Marc in 2013. I believe Paul was the first person to mention his name to me over email, and then I interviewed Warren Farrell for the Red Pill, and that's when I got the second plea to talk to Marc. And I met him in, I believe it was November 2013, went down to LA, and really didn't know, as with everyone I interviewed in the Red Pill, didn't know going in who I was going to meet, what they were going to be like. And by the end of the few hours long interview, myself and my mom, who was operating the cameras, both fell in love with him. And we feel that we had a soul connection with him. It was something that you don't come across every day. It was a spark that was just undeniable, and Marc knew it and we knew it. And the last time I saw him was at my wedding in 2018. And it was a very small wedding with limited capacity. And I couldn't invite as many people as I wanted, but Marc had to be there in my eyes. And I'm so glad he was able to make it. I mean, he was busy all the time. And that he made the drive up to Northern California. And the relationship I had with Marc, I think, was like an older brother, younger sister, protective quality. And never in my life had I ever imagined I would have to be talking about him in past tense. I mean, I've met a lot of people through my films, and I always think of the older people as ones I got to make sure to touch base with a lot, because you never know. But with Marc, he just has had a heart of gold. And now I am starting to understand that the line of work he was doing, because he was so brilliant and he had so much heart and he was doing so much work pro bono just because it was the right thing to do. There were probably people who wanted to see him gone, and I wish I don't know. I'm still in shock. And the last few days of knowing about this, it's been periods of spontaneous crying and anger and disbelief, and it will take a long time to process.
Thank you, Kathy. You know, another person who Marc has known for a long time and shared a number of experiences with that most of us wouldn't perhaps understand or know is Warren Farrell, who's with us too. A wonderful person I've also had the pleasure to know a long time. So Warren, if you're still with us, would you please share with us some thoughts about Marc?
Yes, this is really hard, as it is for all of us. I first heard from Marc, I guess it was probably about 1997 or so, and he was a first-year student at UCLA, and something had happened at UCLA. I forget what the incident was, and it happened while he was reading The Myth of Male Power, and he traced me down and said, could I excerpt, so humbly, could I excerpt a little bit of your book for something that I'm saying in the Daily Bruin? Well, of course, anybody could do that, and he knew that, but it was just like, he was always, there was so much humility to him, even as there was so much competence in him. And so we got to know each other and talk with each other. I really liked him very, very much. And when we finally met, he then started to assist me at workshops that I was doing at Esalen and Big Sur on men's issues, and very disguised as why men are the way they are, and women can't hear what men don't say, things that wouldn't offend too many people. And Marc was, he would just go to the hot tubs at Esalen, and he would talk to people not until 11 o'clock or midnight, but until 2 or 3 in the morning. And then he would come out of the hot tubs and fall asleep on the benches until I woke him up to get ready for the workshop itself. This was, and he would, and then the following night he'd say, I was just talking to all these people. And he said, he would break down almost every time we talked at Esalen. He said, Warren, I don't know if you know this, but you are my hero. You are my hero. I never would have been involved in this without The Myth of Male Power. I said, Marc, you are doing more so take those words alone, and you never would have known that this was a man who he was my hero. He was the person who had challenged the Selective Service. A lot of us, people like me, write about these things, but Marc was doing these things. And it's so much harder to, not only do them and attempt and file the lawsuit, he was making it happen and winning. And then he'd go out and challenge, the domestic violence industry, which was just unchallengeable. And, all these, women and men who, don't, resources for women and not for men, and Marc was doing something about it. He was truly my hero, because he was a doer, and at the same time when he drank too much, but when he drank, his heart also opened up, and it was like a facilitator to the child in him and to the, but it opened up always in a humble way, not in a do you know what I'm doing way, and it was so beautiful, and his involvement with NCFM and with Harry and the extraordinary work that Harry has been doing, and the multiple levels of dedication that he has, he is tied into the organizations, he tied into individuals, and he tied into to law. And those of us who know a lot of lawyers know that there's not a lot of lawyers who will, who will, after they get their law degree, who will run with a sign through a group of people and risk getting arrested, who will, who will cry in your arms and tell somebody else, not you, that you're their hero, as opposed to just talk about themselves. And Marc just connected in that soul type of way with me. There was a problem though with Marc. When Liz met him, she got so enamored with him, I had to start watching it. I didn't really, but she really was, and she would tell you that she had the same feeling toward Marc that Cassie did, just that she was always trying to play Yenta with Marc instead of, you've got to find a woman. There's so many great women out there. Marc, you've got to be with one. There's, I'll introduce you, because, Marc felt it was like or Liz felt it was like a crime to women to not to have a man like Marc be around and not have a man like Marc be in her life, and a crime to Marc to not have that type of connection that he loved with women. And when I'm sure Harry and I and Cassie and those of us here that knew Marc see stuff in the newspapers about, sort of associating him with the Southern Poverty Law Center's condemnation of NCFM and other organizations like that Marc worked with as being anti-women, and just to know Marc's love for women, but also know his love for justice and the passion that he had for everything being fair. He was the ultimate humanist. He was not a womanist, a manist, or anything. He was truly a humanist. He's everything that the people that I know in this movement care about, are about. I see men who are fathers who are bitter and angry, and then I talk to them more, and they take out the pictures of their children, and that anger turns to tears. And those people who really understand anger know that anger is vulnerability's mask, and Marc had that vulnerability, and he understood that vulnerability in all those of us who have given a good part of our life to trying to make sure that this is a world where we really respect women, where we respect women by holding them accountable the same way we hold men accountable. That's truly a respect, and Marc had that type of understanding of what respect is about. So I was crying most of the day on Sunday after Stephen Svoboda called and told me about this, and I've said to Harry that I hope and looks like Harry is going to be ready to do it, to form some type of memorial fund, and I put that on my Facebook for that a memorial fund to support Marc, to support future lawyers to be able to do pro bono work, to challenge the unconstitutionality of so many of our laws, and also to help poorer fathers have the ability to have a good lawyer represent them in court, so we don't have to have women having the right to children and men having to fight for children with a wallet of at least $150,000 to start with. And so the Facebook post that I put to that effect has drawn a number of people saying that they are more than happy to contribute. And so I know that Harry and I had a brief email back and forth, and I think that probably you'll talk about the organization of that, Harry. And I think that'd be a wonderful, wonderful way of honoring one of the finest people. When I talked to Liz, my wife, about some of the stuff that happened with Marc and what he's been doing and the sacrifices he made, the unwillingness he was to take money from anyone he felt that was too poor to be able to fight with if money was required. She said, he sounds like a saint. And there's a lot of us who would have no problem using that word with Mark. And it is the grief I share. I know every single one of us on here shares. Thank you, Harry, for asking.
Martin. And yes, we can talk after this or in near future about the fund. Our board had already been discussing that, so we would like to get that started. But you said a couple things that I think I'd like to comment about aside from that. And one was about the selective service case. We had kicked that around for years. There were a few things, stumbling blocks in our way, and one of them was finding a plaintiff or plaintiffs. We finally found a plaintiff, and the father of our plaintiff is with us today. Mark, are you there? Mr. Leitmeister, are you there?
Yes, Meister's here. He's unmuting.
He's what? He's unmuting. Where did you go, Mark?
I'm right here. I'm here.
So Mark has been with NCFM forever, although he has failed to grow a beard to demonstrate that. So I thought I'd let Mark have and he's known Mark with a C. This is Mark with a K. So I'll let him explain a little bit about his involvement with Mark, and also maybe you can touch bases on the selective service case and how your son got involved.
So I knew Mark before I met him. For a long time, I was a voluntary, unpaid, unappointed moderator of the NCFM discussion group, going back to when we were with Yahoo Groups, and before that we were something else, and then now it's gone somewhere else, but I'm not doing it anymore. But anyway, so I always, look to Mark as a voice of reason on those lists, and a lot of times we had two lists. One was for the board and one was for the general membership, and he would more usually contribute to the board one. But even on the board list, there was sometimes people were, just taking a stand and they were going to die on that hill. And then Mark would be the one to come in and be the voice of reason. Actually, I was very surprised when I met him. I was expecting some 70-year-old man, with a, because I knew he was a lawyer and I didn't know anything about him, but I knew, that he was such a calm voice, that when I met him at the New York 25th anniversary celebration, it was quite a surprise to see this younger than I guess, person there. And so I have corresponded with him, privately and via on that group when I was moderating it. I'm on Facebook with him too, so I read all of that. And it was actually through my moderation of the board's group that my son got involved. I was not on the board at the time. I have been before when I was living in the Twin Cities area. But I was moderating this board, and I saw that they were having a discussion, and one of the big problems is trying to find a young man between the ages of 18 and 26 to be the named plaintiff in this case. And I just contacted Mark offline and said, my son, respects my work with men's issues, and he might be willing to do it if you want me to ask him, because he's that age. He was just turning 18 right then. And so Mark got on the phone with my son a couple days later, and they talked, and so that's how Jimmy got to be the original named plaintiff. They did add another named plaintiff at the time when they were trying to get the case moved. It had gotten moved to Texas because for a while NCFM was not on the case. They were said they did not have standing, so only the actual named plaintiff had standing, and so they moved the case to the circuit court here in Houston. Mark got that NCFM back on the case, but at that time they'd already transferred it here. So then he said, well, I'm going to get a California plaintiff so we can hopefully get the case transferred back to California. Probably worked out best for us that they didn't, because this court is actually pretty favorable for men's issues in some ways. But he then went and argued the case. They didn't actually hold it in Houston when they finally had the trial. They held it in New Orleans so that the students from Tulane University could go. Law students from Tulane could go and watch the arguments, which they do sometimes. So here I was, saying, hey, you got a place to stay in Houston, no matter, whatever, whenever this case, shakes out, and then finally didn't need it because they just went to New Orleans instead. But that's how I, got to know Mark, and mostly through his written word, which I always thought was wise counsel.
Thank you, Mark.
Gary, can I jump on that?
Sure.
Because, so Mark reminded me, so that's my first connection to Marc Angelucci was through that discussion group way back in the day, in the 90s, you guys. Alamano and Swoboda and all you people, we've got some funny stories around that. Hi, guys. So yeah, I mean, like Mark, I felt the same way. So here's this person on the group, and there's a lot of anger to be had around these issues, and that's what a lot of people were posting in this safe space where they could truly be angry and say what they had to say. But I was always trying to jump in with, guys, how can we present this from a loving point of view? Hey, think of your 5-year-old son, or your father who you adore, or your brother who is your role model. And what if this happened to them? And I was always trying to say, how can we present this in a way that people will listen? And Mark, I saw that in all of Mark's posts. And so, like Les Meister said, he's coming at it from the way he put it, voice of reason. And I expected this older, mature, like, where does all that maturity and that approach come from? And so I felt connected to Mark through that group long before I ever saw what he looked like, and I've said to so many people, I'm so glad that I loved him before I saw him, because I can honestly say it's not just because of that appearance, which is, we all know what Mark looks like. And so when Cassie said soul connection, I was like, yes, that's the story I want to share, is about how I felt that soul connection before I ever was even in his presence. And then when you're in his presence, it can be overwhelming just how much he's able to connect to people and get them to listen. It matters. And that's what's so powerful about, that's how he managed to get things done. And I can't believe I'm on a Zoom with Warren Farrell all these years later. Myth and Male Power is how I found NCFM too. So thank you, Warren.
Wow, so much to say about Mark. It's incredible. It's really interesting too about the selective service case. When we needed a second plaintiff, Mark and I were talking about it. I said, just a second. I walked down the hall in our office building because there was a young man working down there named Andrew. I looked at Andrew. I think he was 19. Nice guy. And I said, Andrew, are you interested in being a plaintiff in a court case? He didn't know what that was. We talked and he agreed, and we got our second plaintiff. So then we had standing in California, and Mark was good to go, both in California and Texas. It's really a fascinating history on that case, which is good for discussion at another time, I'm sure. Hang on a second. Hi, Carl. Nice to see you. I'll get you in just a minute. Hang in there. I'm making no apology. I'm looking at pictures. I'm making no apologies for Stephen's beard. But Bruce Kantner just typed in with a comment. Bruce is one of our members, and he's the only one suggested so far to look at Mark's execution as a possible hate crime. So if anybody has thoughts on that later on, I'd appreciate that, because it's possible.
Hello, Gary, may I contribute something more about Mark?
Yes, please.
Discussion from these old timers of NCFM called to mind something that I think that everybody would enjoy and cry over looking up. Online, thanks to Warren Farrell, there are posted 2 parts of a video called, just do a search in YouTube for Warren Farrell on Donahue, the importance of fathers. Donahue on MSNBC in 2002 flew in Warren Farrell and Marc Angelucci, and for some reason they put me on too, as well as some other people, to talk about, are women getting a free ride? There's nothing sort of leading or tricky about that subject matter. Anyway, I recommend this because notwithstanding the fact that the video, the setup of the program was extremely contrived to try to make us look bad, Marc shines, and it's great to see him in action. I did not know who Gloria Allred was at the time. She is a vituperative shrew who they bring on from time to time whenever they want to make mincemeat of men. Marc holds his own against that hellion. At any rate, look up these videos, and I think you'll enjoy seeing Marc's performance. I will just add one observation. He confided with me backstage during a break about how he resented, how angry and upset he was that he was manipulated by the producers to talk about what was, in his opinion, a comparatively minor aspect of his activism, which was petitioning a Los Angeles outlet of Barnes & Noble to put in a men's studies section. There were so many more important things that he wanted to talk about. And it turns out in the final version of the program, you can see this in the excerpts that Warren Farrell has posted on YouTube. They wanted to show a video of Barnes & Noble, very entertaining, and they didn't even show the store that Marc was petitioning, but one here in New York. But at any rate, check out these videos. You'll thoroughly enjoy Marc's performance.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you very much. Well, Mr. Svoboda is longest reigning member of the National Coalitions for Men Board of Directors, also president for Attorneys for the Rights of the Child, and in my view, the most knowledgeable person on the planet in terms of intactivism. And he's known both Warren and Marc forever. He started growing his beard when he met Marc 40 or 50 years ago. So I'd like to hear from Stephen too, please.
Thanks. We're using my wife's computer today, Gina Mele Svoboda, so I'm not trying to under an alias, but so Marc has a friend in Southern California that I got to be friends with too, in a sense, and he needed some patent work done, which is what I do when I'm not doing men's rights related stuff. And I got this call from him, and it was a little odd, and I called him back, and that was how I found out about it, and that was how all of us found out about it, through Marc's friend. I still haven't processed it, I have to say. But anyway, one thing I treasure about Marc is his vehemence, along with Harry Crouch and me, but his vehemence about the principle that the day that the National Coalition for Men starts advocating for special rights for men and not equality for all of us is the day that Marc and Harry and I leave NCFM. And that's very sweet to me. And Marc's exuberance started the day I met him, which was in late 1998. He volunteered to come to the airport in LA and pick me up, and he did it. And somehow we found each other. You couldn't send pictures over phones then, but we did it. And, you know, we became friends, I feel like, pretty much instantly. And the early days of the Men's Law Center, the Men's Legal Center, Marc and I were planning, and I realized I wasn't really cut out to be a litigator, so I sort of dropped out. Marc was very gracious about that, and I'm glad he kept it going with other people, and I'm glad it's still going, and Imran and a bunch of others have done so much. I remember him at the house that I lived at with my mom, my kid's mom, married to her at the time, and he stayed with us and he played with our kids, and he was the kid himself. He was the biggest kid in the room. I mean, he was so joyful, and he's so passionate about how much he loved playing with them, and it was just a heart of gold, absolute heart of gold. And, you know, you talk about people who are self-sacrificing. I mean, he was more self-sacrificing than anybody. And Warren and other people tried to get him to be a little more like, well, maybe get $20 an hour, $30 an hour from the clients that can afford it, right? Because some of them could probably have afforded it, but he was that wasn't in his personality. It really wasn't. And I'm going to show a picture. This is a picture of him at my wedding to Gina. That's about right. At my wedding to Gina, that's Fred Hayward and Marc and Warren and me. And you know, the thing about Marc is that he was so sincere. I mean, I felt like he was as happy as I was that I met Gina. I mean, the love of my life. I met her at the Red Pill, in fact, and I'm wearing my Red Pill shirt today in honor of Marc. The because Marc was so amazing in that movie. And thank you, Cassie. But he was just that way. I saw it time and time and time again. Something good would happen to someone else that had nothing directly to do with Marc, and he was just so happy for that person, just so blissful. I mean, Marc Angelucci is, he's an amazing man. No one will ever replace him. Completely phenomenal. But that above everything else, what a man. I mean, I can't even. There's nothing more I can say.
Can I say a
Thank
little
you,
bit?
Stephen.
Can I
Yeah,
say a
yeah,
little bit,
yeah,
babe?
yeah. Jump back in. Oh,
Thank you, baby. Baby, I love you so much.
Gina, go ahead.
So I definitely did not know Marc for that long. The first time I met him in person was at our wedding, and immediately he felt like, I have 3 brothers. He felt like one of my brothers, and at the wedding, my oldest brother did his own micro batch of brew for the wedding, and he and Marc got off famously talking all about micro batch brew and stuff, and the most memories I have of him is when we were in Crestline just in September 2019 for an NCFM conference, and I remember specifically because that whippersnapper, that's what I got to call him, a whippersnapper. He loved life so much, and we all went to a karaoke bar, and he has a great voice too, and the moves. So we got to sing, and we got to see him sing, and he kind of was interested in this woman that we had seen him meet at the NCFM conference a month before in Chicago, and she drove up from LA for the evening to go dancing. So it was just a really blessed memory, and we took this little ferry around Lake Arrowhead with him the next day, and it was wonderful. And the one, besides just being able to connect and make it so easy to feel like you're his friend immediately, I again, not knowing him that well, sometimes you just intuitively knew he values relationships no matter what. And even though his form has changed, I so know he really hasn't gone anywhere. And who knows, is probably thoroughly enjoying all of us gathering together and getting to connect. And I have to say, Marc, thank you. Since Sunday, there's been 3 really deep relationships that he's helped happen. Lauren and Liz, we love hanging out with, and we've all been so busy, and we all got to have dinner that night when we found out about Marc. My brother, I haven't seen for a while because of COVID, and he's kind of doing his own thing, and because of what, got reconnected to him, and he just keeps working his magic. Changing forms does not change the magic and sainthood that he continues. So thanks, Marc.
It reminds me of a little story. Marc drove this Toyota Corolla into the ground. And if you'd ever ridden it, to sit in it was an experience all by itself, because there were cigarette burns everywhere. I don't think there was any part of that car that didn't have a cigarette burn in it. And I can tell you they weren't from Philip Morris cigarettes either. And he simply didn't care about the car or anything. It's just a matter of enjoying himself and his friends. I see a lot of other faces on this call. I do want to share another story with you. I shared it with some of you. It's about how I met Marc Angelucci. I'd come down from Alaska after I had a vocational counseling rehabilitation firm up there, and had reason to be wondering now about domestic violence services for men, and I went to explore it, finding only that there was very little resources and very little literature. And I stumbled across Phil Cook's book, The Abused Men and Hidden Side of Domestic Violence, and I flew down and I met with Phil, and he got me going a little bit. Then I moved to California and stumbled into the National Coalition for Men Los Angeles chapter. I was in San Diego, so I drove up for a meeting, and a bunch of crazy guys, including Angelucci. and sat around for a few hours, had lunch, went back home. Did that 2 or 3 times, and Mark kept saying, "Well, why don't you join the chapter?" "No, I'm just not a joiner. I don't have 35 bucks. I said, "Well, I'll pay the 35 bucks." And I said, "Okay." But I never paid him back, and I always took great joy in that. I had intended to someday. Unfortunately, now I won't be able to do that. So, Mark, don't hate me for that. I love you like a brother. So I see that Jeannie Fala is on the line with us, and Jeannie is up in the Bay Area. She's a tremendous advocate for fathers' rights and works with a local nonprofit up there doing fundraising, writing grants, things like that. So, Jeannie, would you like to say a few things about Mark?
Well, I went to the men's conference in Detroit in 2014, and Mark was there. I'm sorry that I saw him at I don't know, different. I don't know if he was in Las Vegas at the Fathers' Rights Movement conference. I was there last August, in Vegas, but I never got to know him as deeply as all of you. And it's a pity, because the things that I have heard, I don't know, it's so sad. It's sad, and I'm angry. I'm angry that I've reached out to domestic violence organizations that admit men, including Valley Oasis in Lancaster, and then the Family Place in Texas. And there's one in the Bay Area. They have a support group for men. They're right in San Leandro, for male survivors, perpetrators, in between. I really want to do what I can, given the political image of the men's advocacy movement, to try to get him the recognition that he deserves in the mainstream. And it's good to hear that Warren Farrell wants to, the idea of the Memorial Fund. I'll contribute. I don't know. It's sad that, I think that he will get, God willing, the recognition for the work that he did, but after his death. And I've told people that I know at the nonprofit that I do work for, they have an excellent father involvement program. They are called the Cope Family Support Center. They run parent education programs in Contra Costa County. There's also the Father Corps in Alameda County. And I'm actually involved in, it's a group of nonprofits. We want to push for legislation to help reform the child support system. A lot of the groups I'm involved with actually they're more, if you will, politically, favorable in California. They tend to be represent the interests of, like people of color, low income people, etc. I like the idea that this memorial will be for, legal services on a pro bono basis, and for the right reasons. And I've told people that the men's advocacy movement, we're really where the gays were in the 70s. We're where, anything related to feminism was in the 60s or when I was a kid. And where African American, movements were in the 40s. We get a bad rap, but times are changing. And I've also, I message in a way that does resonate with the mainstream. So I'm going to do what I can to advance what he was about and his work. And I think I'll get results. I feel, I don't know, I think just sad. I was so shocked. I couldn't believe it. And I just,
Yeah. Thank you, Jeannie. It hit us all that way. I'm very thankful for what you do up in San Francisco, and so is Mark. Uh, Move on a little bit. I don't want to forget anybody here. And there's that Tom Golden guy out there. You know, we years ago, Tom, as disrespectful as the guy is, he had issue with me and another gentleman on the East Coast, a retired police lieutenant who was investigating suicides. And the lieutenant came across some numbers, and we pulled some numbers from the coroner's department, and we posted something, and we were making the case that there's a relationship between some suicides and family violence, abused men. But there was no strong scientific evidence. And Tom is one of the most honest people I know, and he took issue with that. You guys don't have enough information yet. To us, it's obvious. Tom's a scientist, and it wasn't. But he was also a good friend, and I'd like to hear from him about his experiences with Mark. Mr. Golden.
Oh, bless you, Harry. It's been quite a run, eh?
It's been quite a run.
And you're the only man I know who has a last name that rhymes with grouch.
You got to do better than that. I've heard of all.
That's the one thing I'd say. You know, Mark and I knew each other from the conference we attended together, and that was about all that I knew him face to face. But I tell you what, he was a hero to me. He was important to me because when I first got involved in all this stuff, it was the VAWA that got me in. And I was like, what the hell is going on here? And I wrote to my local representatives. I wrote to my congressman. I wrote to my senators. I called the domestic violence place. Everybody said the same thing. No, we don't deal with men. And I'm thinking, what the hell is going on? Is the world gone insane? And then I heard about this lawyer in California that was challenging men not getting services for domestic violence. He became my immediate hero. And I'm glad to say I was able to tell him that, you know, when I met him first at the conferences. I mean, just an amazing guy that he would be willing to do that. I mean, no, all the other lawyers I knew were talking about billable hours, you know, they were talking about this and that, but Mark was talking about what's fair, what's right. Oh gosh, you gotta love people like that. And you know, one of the things I want to do in the future is to do, in fact, I'll probably do it this week, do a video on grief and the differences in the grief from murder, from the grief in just regular old grief, because there are some very important differences that I want people to know about. So I'll do that, and I'll let people know when that one comes out. But, you know, the most important thing, and one of the things that's obvious, is you never get a chance to say goodbye. You know, none of us got a chance to say goodbye to Mark. And that's huge. That's just huge. And on that sad note, I'm out.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Jeff and Carol, please.
No, a year ago, we lost one of the founding members of NCFN, Richard Haddad, who had developed a terminal disease and decided to end his life and to spare his family. On May 20th of this year, Gordon Finley, who was a retired professor emeritus from the University of Florida, I believe, had been suffering for cancer for a number of years, and he passed away. He was a prolific writer, was able to get a number of things in, like the Wall Street Journal, New York Times, tough to get in there for a men's rights advocate. And he too will be sorely missed. And now we've lost Mark. So just in a year, we've had a horrible hit in terms of losing wonderful people in this movement. You know, I met another person several years ago who's with us. His name's Carl Augustison. The guy speaks more languages than there are on the planet and has more PhDs than Warren. Or maybe they're tied, I don't know. He lives over in another country. I always call it the Democratic Republic of Georgia, but he corrects me and says, Democratic's not in the name, or Democrat. And he's traveled the world, and when we hear from him, by this time, I think he may have set foot in every country on the planet, and none of that is in jest. Carl first came to our organization a number of years ago. He flew over and wanted to meet me for what reason I don't fully understand. But since then, he put in considerable time and developed a written convention for the elimination of all forms of discrimination against men for the United Nations. And when he set foot on a number of countries, he's attempted to develop relationships that might lead to a signer of the convention. Thus far, to my knowledge, nobody on the planet has volunteered to put their signature on it. However, I would like you all to meet Carl Gustafson. Carl, you still with us?
Yeah, I'm still with you here. Yeah, like all of you, the news hit me really hard. I'm on a different time zone than you. I'm literally 11 hours ahead. So I woke up Sunday morning, yesterday morning, and you know what? I had the same reaction I had when I was living in the Netherlands on September 11th, seeing the news like channel survey, U.S. under attack, on and on and on. Like, nah, this isn't happening. Is this like a bad movie or something? It's like Marc Angelucci murdered. I'm like, no way. Is this a joke or something? This can't be real. But of course, I quickly realized, no one would joke like this. It's real. And I was just devastated. And I'll tell you the moment it hit you. I don't know how familiar all of you are with the Orthodox Church here in Eastern Europe, but the churches usually remain open throughout much of the day. And on the right-hand side of the church is an icon, and there's like a tin of sand for putting candles in honor of people who died. So I said to my wife, I'm going to the church, walking distance from here. I'm going to light a candle for Marc. And as I was putting the candle in that sand, man, that's the moment it hit me. I just started tearing up in the church there. That's when I knew it was real. I said, please God, bring his soul into your kingdom. He's done so much good in his life. And it's just, my gosh, it hit me at that moment. You mentioned my project. I've been off and on trying to get countries to sponsor this. And I've been working on my travel language video project, but when I finish, I'm going to get going with this project again. But I met up online with a guy from Malawi who said he would have contact in Malawi. My wife did not want me going to Malawi alone. She said, you know what you're getting into. This could be dangerous. And she said, by the way, and I said this to Marc, and he thought this was funny, if you go there and you get killed, I will raise our daughter to be the biggest feminist that there ever was. Sort of a warning. But as I said to Marc, I need someone to go with me. And Marc said, I'm up for it. And we kind of kicked it around off and on. And when I last saw him in Chicago 5 years ago, I said, yeah, no, I haven't forgotten either. Let's find a time. And this shows you that, you don't have to do things the next day, but don't put things off forever. Because now I'm never going to have that chance to go to Malawi with Marc. And one thing also I want to mention, cute story Marc told me. You notice I don't have the beard, but I do have, can you guys still see me?
Yes. We can see it, Carl.
Something popped up my computer screen, that's why I'm asking. I do have the fedora hat. I've always thought it was stupid that men can't wear hats inside. And Marc mentioned, if he wants to restart right at this moment. Marc mentioned a story where, I forget what the reason was, but he was in court. An announcement went out that men are not to wear hats. So he asked someone near him, can I borrow your hat? And the judge said, sir, can you take off this hat? Marc said, does this rule apply to everyone? And Marc was stubborn about it. But later on, he was in that same court, the same judge, and nobody, not even women, could wear hats. And the judge asked Marc, how do you like our new no hats rule for anybody? So yeah, Marc managed to get that just a little tiny sexist rule removed. And one thing I want to mention about Marc, first time I met him was in New Orleans, 2012 at an Intactivist rally. The AAP just had that horrible statement, which they allowed to expire in 2017, that circumcision has benefits that outweigh the risk, but not enough to warrant recommending it. They later admitted that, well, we said benefits, we meant culture, religious, which is bullshit too, but at any rate. So it was deceiving, but Marc was there, and that's where the bloodstained suit was first used. And Marc was one of the first 7 men to put the bloodstained suit on, which we now see everywhere. And I know Brother K, for those of you who know him, mentioned that Marc was one of the first ones to wear that in New Orleans.
Thank you, Carl.
Sure.
It's hang on, Stefan. When most of you guys are members of the National Coalition for Men, thank you very much. And Marc's a big reason for I'm just proud to be associated with any and all. But we have somebody on the line. Erica, are you still out? I don't think we have her picture, but Erica, are you with us?
Yes. Hi.
Erica, hang on. Let me do the setup here. Erica and her husband, Jay, came to NCFM. How long ago was that? 15, 20 years ago? I forget.
Yeah, it was probably about 18 or so years ago.
God, we're getting old.
Yeah.
And they had a family court issue regarding their daughter and Jay's ex-wife, who was, I hope you don't get offended by this, guys, but a total bitch.
Oh, I agree.
Great. And so they joined us, and back then we would do picketing events. Ray Bloomhurst, another member, made our signs, like arrest false accusers, that sort of thing. And Jay and Erica would come out, hold signs and walk around, and it was really great. Marc joined us a few times too. There's more stories about that. But that's the background with us and Erica and her husband, Jay. Erica, I'm going to let you say a few words if you would. Thank you.
Thanks, Harry. All I can say is that we were really shocked to hear the news about Marc. It's just so awful, and my heart goes out to all of you. I obviously didn't know him as well as many of you did, but I did have the pleasure of meeting him on a couple of occasions and events, like Harry said, and all I can say is, you know, the world lost a great person who has done so many things and sadly could have done so many more. And I just, you know, all I can say is I appreciate everything that he did for this father's rights and men's rights movement. And of course, you know, I never had any reason to get involved with this except that my husband had come in contact with Harry after having all these issues in family court. And I guess in a weird way, I'm glad that you know, got involved with all you guys. And you know, sometimes you have to get red pilled. And I guess that's all I have for me. And I just sending all my heartfelt sympathy to everyone. And thank you, Harry, for putting this together, and everyone else.
You're welcome, Erica. Say hello to Jay for me, okay?
I sure will.
You know, our Chicago, I see a number of people involved in our Chicago chapter that had died for a number of years and has come back together, including Lori, who we talked to earlier. And I see Les Bender there. So Les is a new member of the Chicago chapter, which is doing some great things and meeting on a regular basis. I'm really happy and pleased about that. Les, you want to say a few words?
Yeah, thank you, Harry. Can everybody hear me okay?
You're good.
Yeah, I was listening to, I mostly just came here to listen because, you know, Lori really knows, you know, I've got a lot of my own issues, and because of it, you know, I spend a lot of time with people that, well, maybe not a lot of time, but some time with people that really don't see the world the way we do. And they have their own reasons for that. But when I, you know, after I tell them all about myself and my story that they think is, you know, horrifying and tragic, I just look at it like it's kind of long, boring, and pathetic. But, you know, then if they're still not moved to at least listen, then I say, you know, don't take my word for it. I've got kind of a long list of heroes, and Marc was real near the top. You know, I got a chance to meet him just only so briefly at the last ICMI, just long enough to kind of wave and quick shake of the hand, because as everybody has said, you know, he was just one of these people that lights up the room, and he was never not mobbed when he showed his face there. But I would point to him and say, what do you mean, men's rights advocates don't do anything but gripe and complain? Look what this guy's doing. Pay attention. If you want to know what's going on, you're going to have to go look, because it's not going to be brought to you. I tell people about folks like Janice, Harry, yourself, Paul, Dr. Farrell. I encouraged everybody that would stop and listen to watch Cassie's movie. And I would say, here's why, because, yeah, I'm just one person. I've got this, this story to tell, but it doesn't really matter that much. If you want to know what's really going on, you're going to have to go look. I've, in just the process of doing that, I've at least changed the view a little bit of a few people that, to hear them to begin with, you'd think, man, this person's just never going to get it. Mark's work was one thing I could always point to and say, look, you ask me about my lack of faith in the justice system. If you don't want to hear about that, look at this guy. He's still trying to rescue it. And he's doing things that nobody thought could ever be done. It's so awful to think he's not going to be able to keep doing that. I don't really know much just exactly how angry I am about it. But I've been trying to move, be a little more like Mark and move out of my anger and make some place for compassion. Just thinking about what he did and the way he did it and why he did it helps me do that. Because left to my own devices, and if I had never known about guys like Mark, I want to tell you, I was really ready to just give up and walk away from the whole thing. I really was, and it's people like Mark, like all of you, who I consider all of you are my heroes, that keep me hanging in there and keep me involved. Because, as I've told so many people, I don't have to be, I've got myself set up. I live alone, and I'm, I have no family. I have no one holding me here, and I intend to keep it that way for myself, except that every one of you that I'm looking at right now is a reason to just hang in and keep fighting, and so is Mark. He really is. I won't ever forget about him. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Les. I appreciate it. There's somebody on this call that I don't know real well. I don't think I've ever met her, and if I did, I'm sure I'd remember her. Her first name is Janice, and I think she has met Mark, I'm guessing here, at various conferences, and maybe even went out to dinner with him, could have sung karaoke with him, and probably developed some nice lies and stories about him in the rest of us. So Janice, welcome, and please share whatever you'd like.
Unfortunately, I did not get to sing karaoke with Mark. That would have been wonderful. I'm a huge karaoke fan. I didn't even get to see him sing. So no, I'm not going to say very much here. I'm honored to be with you all as you share your stories. I know I'm the person who knew Mark least. I met him just last year at the ICMI in Chicago, and like everybody else, he knocked me out with his passion for justice. And like everyone says, he lit up the room. That in this case isn't really a metaphor. The light of love and passion, it just seemed to literally shine out of his face. And he was just one of those people that I was happy to know he was in the world, because I knew he was making a difference for good so tremendously. And so to have him gone now is devastating. I feel that the world is measurably lesser without him. And the comfort I've taken from just sitting here for the last hour, listening to all of your wonderful memories and your expressions of love for him, is the conviction that we all will carry forward a part of his work, and that I feel a renewed determination to do the work that Marc was doing in his name. So that's all I want to say. Thank you very much. I'm honored to have been a part of this.
Thank you, Candace. I noticed Bruce, yeah, Kantner's with us too. He's been a long time NCFM member and contributes to our website with various articles. And we're kind of always at odds because I like newer stuff. But he does satirical work, which is pretty good, under an anonymous name. Bruce, would you like to take a minute or two and talk about Marc?
I actually have never met him, but I know him from what I've seen of Cassie J's film. I know him from that. I've seen him, and I know he did a lot of good work, and it's be very difficult to replace. So my anonymous name, by the way, Mr. Manor, so it's not a big secret. So anyways, thanks for inviting me, because this was a shock. I mean, I don't know anybody who was murdered like that. And it's not a typical thing. So something was going on. And I think it's very important that if they can solve this case, that they do solve this case.
Thank you, Bruce. I noticed that somebody up here says honey badger something or other, but I don't see.
That's our producer, Harry.
That's who? Is
Our
that
producer,
Brian?
he's just off on the sidelines monitoring comments and things like that.
Okay.
But it's
That's why I
Brian
don't see a picture.
It's Brian Martinez. I'm sure he'd like to have something to say.
In that case, please do.
Hold on a second. I feel like really outclassed in this room. I just want to help, but I will say that I've met Marc a couple of times. I think the first time I ever did, actually, I went to the LA premiere of The Red Pill, which Cassie was hosting, and I had the really good fortune of meeting her, of meeting Marc, and so many other passionate people about this subject that I think is really important. And Marc was, I mean, he just walked right up to me. I didn't know who he was because I was still kind of new to all this stuff, and he knew me, and he's like, "Oh, I love you guys. You're so awesome." And I was like, "Really?" And yeah, I hung out with him after the premiere, and he was just a really great guy that's just really easy to get along with. And then I think I saw him again in 2019, and at the most recent ICMI. And of course, I was lucky enough to meet a lot of you guys there as well. And I remember the last night, which was the Sunday night, the last night of the ICMI. Karen Strawn, Girl Writes What, and I, we had both had talked about and joked about everything leading up to the ICMI, that we would end up going to Hooters because we thought it would be really hilarious. And we did, and Marc was there, and he was just so full of life, and he was having so much fun, and he was extremely grateful. And again, he came to me and he said, "I want to buy you a drink, and I really love what you guys are doing." And almost never talked about himself. He just came across as like everybody else's biggest fan. So thanks for letting me say something. I do feel like I don't know him as well as you guys do. But yeah, that's it, I guess. It's just really a tragedy.
Thank you, Brian. I noticed Jacob's on this call too. Jacob is in Chicago, a member of Chicago chapter, kind of a motivator over there. Relatively young guy, new to the movement. Jacob, do you have a couple comments about Marc? You still with us? Maybe not. Well, gosh, does anybody else? I'll just open it up, but before I forget I'm getting old, so I forget shit real easy.
Harry, could I add one more anecdote to this?
Absolutely.
About Marc. I just wanted to add, Warren talked about Marc's humility, and absolutely amazingly so. I mean, if there was ever a guy that had reasons not to be so humble, I think it was Marc, and yet he still was. But I recall at ICMI, we had a dinner there, and during that dinner, we gave both Marc and Harry Eggard watches in recognition for their work that they've done over the years, a paltry amount of recognition compared to what they've actually done. But about an hour after that, Marc came up to me, and he was drunk, as he was throughout most of that weekend. But Marc was a wonderful, absolutely joyous when he was drinking, not anything negative. But he kept going on about this watch like it was a Rolex, and it was far from a Rolex. And what was struck me about this, and what I'm reminded of now, is that in addition to Marc's humility, to his incredible work, to the light he brought into people's lives, Marc was a man who knew how to be happy, unlike anybody else I really think that I've met in my life. This simple little thing for him, he enjoyed like it was a Rolex, and like it was the best thing that ever happened to him, and he just glowed about it. And it just kills me that a light like that has been snuffed out too young. This is just the worst possible thing. But I will always have those memories of Marc as being this incredible light. And I think the world will remember him that way.
Yeah, Jacob is back if he wants to talk.
Excuse me?
I said Jacob, there he is. Okay.
Oh, hi, Jacob. If you'd like to say a few words about Marc, please do.
I never met Marc, but he was a leading light, a star in the movement, and inspiring to everyone he met. In the grand scheme of things, there are people who are do-gooders, who make the world a better place, and who are fighting against the evils of the world. And Marc was clearly one of those. In this movement, he is clearly a leader and one of my heroes. And it was shocking and horrifying to hear this news. That's about all I can say. I'm still slightly shaking from the news. It really hits home in a way that few other things have during this time. And all I can say is that I will try to emulate him in as many ways as possible and try to make the world a better place in my own small way, even though I doubt I can ever be as magnificent as he was. Thank you.
Thank you, Jacob. And I guess Jacob reflects the fact that Marc had a tremendous effect on I don't know how many people that had never even met the guy. You know, that's a phenomenal thing. And Paul talked about Marc and humility, which made me feel a little guilty for not having learned those lessons a little earlier on. But hopefully I can become more humble now because of Marc, and demonstrate a little bit more courage in some things where Marc would not hesitate. In my work with NCFM, I have to walk this fine line to keep our organization balanced somehow. And Marc was, he and I would often talk about that. And then I go on his Facebook page and I go, holy shit, what's he doing? On his Facebook page, he just didn't have any hesitation or reservation about letting his emotions spill over into the public, but he would never do that on our Facebook page, which I always found was interesting and joyous in Marc Angelucci's own way. And there's so many things we could say about him. I think we've touched bases with everybody I see here. Paul, I've never been involved with one of these before, so you need to give me a little guidance here. Are we done, or are we doing something else, or what happens now?
Well, I think everybody's shared. I mean, I would typically just ask, is there anybody else that has anything left unsaid that they'd like to add? Dan, I see Cassie J raising her hand like a good student. So by all means, and give them that shot, and then we'll close out and we'll go on about our lives doing better, having known Marc Angelucci.
Well, I love Cassie J, so Cassie can talk anytime, anywhere she wants. Cassie?
Yeah, I just wanted to add to something you said, Harry, about how many people he's touched, because a part of his life that I felt like he always showed me, but I don't see a lot talked about online or in his biography online or in news articles or anything, is that he was regularly teaching family law at UCLA. And he loved those students like they were his own children. And I remember for the 7-day theatrical run that we had of The Red Pill in Los Angeles for the premiere, every day for those 7 days, he brought his students into the theater. And some days I think they were the only people in the theater, because there would be screenings at 11 a.m. and just times that people usually don't go to the movies on a Tuesday. But he was really active with his students and loved them so much. And, you know, I also want to add that he's been working, and he was working on so many high profile cases, like we know about the Selective Service and the CPS case that was coming up, and the Jerry Cox case that he's been working on for years. But he always had room in his heart for the little guy. And I want to share a little story, because I think in tragedies like these, we do tend to wonder what were the days leading up to what happened. And the last time I spoke to Marc was on July 1st, and I reached out to him because my husband's dear friend from childhood was being taken to the cleaners in a custody battle. And Marc always told me if I ever needed him, to call him, but I really treated that offer like, I get one golden ticket or just a couple. I didn't reach out to him for many favors, but this was one of the few. And so I reached out to Marc on July 1st, just 10 days before his death. And he told me he was swamped. He was driving to Las Vegas at that time. I don't know if it was for work or to see loved ones, but he said he would take the call with my husband's friend, and he did. And he told me right after that he really felt for the guy. And, my husband's friend has just been in tears over this. And then he called my husband saying that Marc finally gave him hope, and he's starting to see the silver lining, and that he just felt he was in a completely hopeless state. And Marc was not just someone who can enact legal change and help him in that way, but also an instant friend and almost therapist to him, in being so compassionate and understanding of his emotions. And so my husband's friends then talked to him last on the Thursday before the Saturday that he was murdered. And by that point, Marc was back in his home. So I'm grateful that I had that interaction with him, to touch base with him recently, and to know we were in a great place. And I just wanted to show that, because even though he was so swamped, he always had heart space for the little guy. And that was just who he was.
Well said. Thank you, Cassie.
I just want to close with one thing. I was writing Marc's last name down once, and I asked him, is it 2 L's or 2 C's? And he goes, it is 1 L and 2 C's. Warren, you can always remember it. Little angel is what it means in Italian. And I think there's no word that is more appropriate to close this tribute to him than the person he reminds us most of, or at least reminds me most of, is a little angel. Thank you, Mark, for all you have given.
Thank you, Warren, for that. I agree. It's a great place to end this discussion. And Paul and Warren, thank you, and Janice, thank you for allowing me to share this time with all of you. I love you all for what you do.
Love you right back, Harry.
So
Yeah.
we can talk again offline about some of the things we want to talk about, Warren.
Absolutely.
I'll discuss with you too.
Blessings to everyone for your hard work. I appreciate it all so much.
Absolutely.
Love to everybody from Peter.
Mhm.
Love you too, Peter. Go
How do
ahead.
we do that, Paul? Do we just hit the X button or?
Yeah.
Oh, goodbye, everybody.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Be safe. Bye.
Bye.
Love and
Bye.
Bye.